Story 1. One early spring, I decided to sell our travel trailer. It was only a few years old, looked new inside and out, priced right, and it was the prime time of year to sell. I knew it would be gone after a showing or two. The first family showed up after an odd phone call. The wife did all the talking but made it clear that her husband, Glenn, made the decisions in the family. She asked a ton of questions on the phone so she could give the information to Glenn. Glenn was in the room with her as this was going on. It was strange, but I figured whatever. They rolled in, and I met Glenn. He tried to avoid eye contact and seemed to be trying to play a power game. The wife and kids were in love with the camper and were polite and friendly. Glenn, on the other hand, was acting like a jerk. As I answered his questions, he occasionally smirked. At this point, I was not interested in selling him even something unpleasant from my backyard, but I refused to lower myself to his behavior. I gave him the respect he did not deserve, taking the high road, since his poor wife and kids did not need to see me telling him to leave. Eventually, Glenn said, "I am going to be giving you amount. We will be back next weekend with the check." He barked at his wife and kids to get back in the car. I told him that I had not agreed to any price. Maybe it would still be around next weekend, maybe not. He smirked again and drove away. Glenn's price was exactly what I would have accepted from any potential buyer who was not rude. At that point, I was clear about one thing: Glenn was never going to end up with my camper because, well, you know. The next day, a couple showed up to look at the trailer. They were visibly impressed by the price and condition and asked what I would take for it, as they could meet me later in the day with cash. I offered to sell it to them for Glenn's price. A few hours later, I had a thick stack of $100 bills in hand, and they left with the trailer, thrilled with the deal. The next Friday, just as I expected, Glenn's unhappy wife called. She told me that they had gotten a loan and wanted to pick up the trailer the next day. I played dumb and asked what she meant. After she explained it again, I dropped the news. "So sorry, but it is gone." I told her that all Glenn had to do was respectfully offer the amount he told me I would be taking, then leave a deposit check, and they would have been picking up their camper tomorrow. I reminded her that she was standing there when I told Glenn that we had not agreed to a price and that it was still very much for sale to whoever wanted it. Finally, I told her to make sure that Glenn knew it had sold for his price the very next day. So unfortunate. It seems that Glenn was disrespectful and, in the end, got what he gave. Story 2. For context, I normally do my grocery shopping while listening to my headphones. I usually don't have pockets, so I put my phone in my purse, which is like a backpack, and I feed the wire of my headphones from my bag to my ears. On this day, at my friendly neighborhood Kroger, I was waiting in a particularly long line. All the registers were closed minus one row of self-checkouts. There were about 7 people in front of me and about the same amount behind me. I didn't mind, honestly. I was jamming out listening to the new album of my favorite artist, loudly. As I'm jamming, I feel a tap on my shoulder. I ignored it at first, mostly because I didn't think anyone knew me. Then the tapping on my shoulder got rougher. I took out one of my headphones and turned to the familiar "excuse me" I heard so much about. Sure enough, it was a Karen. She had tall, long blonde hair tied tightly into a ponytail, a blue school football shirt and leggings. She wasn't wearing a mask, but her mini-me daughter was, which was odd to me. As I silently questioned her, she proudly announced, "Hi, so, since you don't have much in your cart, and I only have a few things, can I cut in front of you?" I looked from her to her cart, which was full to the brim, then back at her. Before I said anything, I saw the guy behind her. He was livid. He wasn't looking at us, but he was shaking his head, gripping the basket he was holding. He kept giving Karen side glares and muttering. I guessed that she must have annoyed him enough, and he had no choice but to let her cut in front of him. I also saw that everyone else in line behind him was watching us or glaring. I believe she had cut in front of all of them, and they were all angry with her. At that moment, I decided to be the foil in her plans of line cutting for everyone. I shook my head at her. "Sorry, ma'am, but you're going to have to wait in line like everyone else." Karen looked offended as the guy behind her, not so quietly, laughed at her. She started going on about how she was late for something, and I just didn't care. I turned my back to her and put my headphones back in. I go back to jamming as I feel Karen tapping on my shoulders again. I ignored her as long as possible. Luckily, my music was turned all the way up, so I didn't have to hear her screeching. Suddenly, Karen pulled out my headphones, right out of my ears. Shocked, I started to whip back around to yell at her, but she was already yelling. "How dare you have your headphones in while I'm talking to you, young lady? I'm 27. I said let me cut in front." As Karen yanked my headphones more, she ended up pulling the rest of my cord out. From my purse comes the very loud growl of the song I was listening to. I stood there, stunned. We now had everyone's attention in the store. Karen's jaw dropped as the verse was being sung loudly. I quickly tried to shut off my phone, and as I unzipped my purse, the artist growled again. Karen threw my headphones at me. "Never mind," she said with the most disgusted tone I ever heard, took her kid and went to the back of the line. I was mad, confused, and embarrassed as I plugged my headphones back in. I avoided eye contact with everyone even as I could tell everyone was happy she went to the back of the line. The guy behind me was too busy laughing at Karen, and the cashier gave me a nod of approval when I got to the self-checkout. Story 3. This happened a few summers ago. I'm 13 now, but I was like 10 or 11 when all this went down. It's one of those stories that still makes me shake my head whenever I think about it. I grew up in a pretty average neighborhood. Not fancy, but not terrible either. The kind of place where most people know each other, at least by face. My mom worked long hours at the hospital as a nurse, so during summer breaks, I'd often hang out with my best friend who lived just 2 blocks away from me. He was the same age as me, and we'd been in the same class since 2nd grade. My friend had it rough at home. His dad wasn't in the picture, and his mom was always stressed about money. He was skinny, wore glasses, and was an easy target for some of the older kids in the neighborhood. I wasn't exactly a tough guy myself, but I hated seeing him get pushed around, so I always stuck up for him. Earlier that month, there had been this incident. We were walking home from the corner store with some sodas and candy when these 3 older boys, probably around 13 or 14, started following us on their bikes. They'd been trouble for a while, always looking to mess with younger kids. Without any warning, they jumped my friend, knocked him down, and started kicking him. I tried to help, but one of them pushed me away. A neighbor saw what was happening and yelled at them, which scared them off. My friend ended up with a black eye and bruises all over his arms and ribs. He didn't want to tell his mom because he didn't want her to worry even more, so we kept it between us. That day at the park, it was hot, the kind of summer day where the air feels thick and heavy. We were just hanging out at the swings, not bothering anyone. There were 3 little kids playing in the sandbox area, probably under 8 years old. No adults were watching them, which wasn't that unusual in our neighborhood. We were talking about a new video game when I spotted them, the same 3 boys on their bikes, riding into the park. My stomach instantly knotted up. My friend asked if I saw them. I told him yeah, and suggested we ignore them, hoping they might leave us alone. But I could already tell from the way they were looking at us that they weren't going to just ride by. They stopped about 20 feet away from the swings, dropping their bikes on the grass. My friend's face went pale. I could see his hands gripping the swing chains tighter. One of the boys called us out, referring to my friend as a crybaby and me as his bodyguard. My friend stared at the ground, but I was tired of them pushing us around. Without really thinking, I raised my middle finger at them. The tallest boy asked if I wanted to fight, using a crude insult. I told them to leave us alone since we weren't bothering them. The shortest boy made a stupid joke about us breathing their air and how that bothered them. They all laughed like it was the funniest joke ever. The tallest one threatened to finish what they started with my friend. Something just snapped in me. I challenged them, asking why they didn't bother someone their own size and implying they were too scared to do so. The tallest boy threatened that we were both dead. We traded insults back and forth for about a minute. I'm not proud of the words I used, but I was scared and trying not to show it. My friend was frozen beside me, probably reliving what had happened before. That's when this silver SUV pulled up to the curb. A woman who had to be at least 50 years old got out, slamming her door. She had that haircut, you know, the one short in the back, longer in the front, dyed an unnatural shade of blonde. She was wearing expensive-looking workout clothes, even though she didn't look like she worked out much. To my surprise, the boys immediately went over to her. One of them pointed at us, and I could see her face getting redder by the second. She marched across the grass towards us, the boys trailing behind her with smug looks on their faces. Karen demanded to know if we were the little monsters who were swearing at her grandchildren. I was confused and denied it, explaining we weren't talking to any little kids. My friend added that we'd been on the swings the whole time. Karen accused us of lying, saying her grandsons had told her everything. I realized what was happening. The boys had told her that we were swearing at the little kids in the sandbox, her grandchildren apparently. It was a complete lie. I tried to explain that those weren't little kids, but were our age and had beaten up my friend last month. Karen called it another lie and said she'd never seen such disrespectful children in her life. She turned to the boys and sweetly asked them if we were the ones who used horrible words around them. The tallest boy put on an innocent face and confirmed we were saying bad words and showing our middle fingers at them. Karen turned back to us, her face now almost purple with rage. She threatened to beat us up and our families too, demanding to know how we dared to behave that way. She stepped forward and actually hit my friend on his shoulder hard enough that he almost fell off the swing. He let out a small yelp of pain. I protested, telling her she couldn't do that. Karen insisted she could do whatever she wanted because she was an adult, and that we needed to learn some respect. She raised her hand like she was about to hit him again, and I jumped up from my swing. But right at that moment, something incredible happened. A police car was driving slowly past the park. My friend, seeing it, immediately raised his arm and started waving frantically, calling for the officer's help. The police car pulled over, and a male officer stepped out. He walked over to our little group with a concerned look on his face. He asked what was going on. Karen immediately switched to a sweet voice. She expressed relief at the officer's arrival and accused us of harassing her grandchildren, using terrible language and making obscene gestures. The boys nodded along, looking like perfect angels. I denied it, explaining that those weren't little kids but our age, and they had beaten up my friend last month and were now lying to their grandmother about us. My friend added that Karen had hit him on the shoulder, and he pulled down his t-shirt collar to show a red mark that was already forming. Karen denied hitting him hard, claiming she barely touched him. The officer asked Karen if she had put her hands on my friend, and she admitted she had but claimed he deserved it. The officer told her to step back and calm down. The officer separated everyone. He spoke to me and my friend first, then to the boys, and finally to Karen. The little kids in the sandbox were completely oblivious to everything, still playing happily. As the officer talked to Karen, I could see her getting more and more agitated. She kept pointing at us and raising her voice. At one point, she actually tried to walk away, but the officer told her to stay put. After what felt like forever, the officer came back to us. He said he'd heard everyone's stories and that the other kids admitted they'd had problems with us before but claimed we provoked them today. He asked if that was true. My friend and I looked at each other. I admitted I did flip them off, but only after they came up to us and started threatening us. The officer asked about the little children and whether we had sworn around them or at them. I denied this, explaining we weren't talking to them at all and didn't even know they were related to those guys. The officer nodded and walked back to Karen. Their conversation got heated again. I couldn't hear everything, but I did catch her mentioning her husband's importance and threatening to have the officer's badge. Finally, the officer returned with a serious expression. He explained that he'd called for another unit to take statements from everyone, including the playground attendant who was watching from the community center. I hadn't even noticed there was someone watching from the building across the field. The officer continued, saying the attendant confirmed our story that the older boys approached us first and that Karen struck a minor. He informed Karen she was being detained for assault on a minor. Karen was outraged, demanding to speak to his supervisor. But it was too late. The second police car had arrived, and within minutes, Karen was being placed in handcuffs while screaming about how important she was and how we would all regret this. The boys tried to sneak away in the confusion, but the second officer stopped them and called their parents. Turns out, none of them were related to Karen and all the little kids weren't her grandchildren. The boys had just seen an opportunity when an entitled-looking woman showed up and decided to use her as a weapon against us. My mom was called, and so was my friend's mom. They both arrived looking worried sick. When my mom found out what happened, she hugged me tight, then checked my friend's shoulder. We later found out that Karen got charged with assault on a minor, making false statements to a police officer, and resisting arrest because she tried to get back in her SUV when they went to handcuff her. She ended up spending a night in jail and got community service plus a fine. The three boys got in trouble too, not just for lying that day, but also for what they'd done to my friend the month before. Their parents were horrified when they heard the full story, especially when they saw the playground attendant's statement backing us up. My friend and I still went to that park after that, but things were different. The boys never bothered us again. Sometimes I think about Karen and wonder if she learned anything from what happened. Somehow, I doubt it. Story 4. I am 25 years old, and I am a woman from a small town. My father, strict and serious, always worked as a rancher. My mother, who struggled with alcohol, abandoned us when I was about 9 years old after being unfaithful to him multiple times with different men. In the end, I was raised by my grandmother, who is now 99 years old, with an almost entirely absent father and a completely missing mother. When the time came to attend university, I wasn't allowed to go because someone had to help my father on the farm and care for my grandmother at home. Since I was already older, my dreams of studying civil engineering disappeared. Around that time, I started streaming video games in my free time. At first, I had almost no viewers, but over time I improved a lot. Although I'm not a well-known content creator, I now earn about 800 to 1,000 euros per month, which allows me to live fairly well. A couple of years passed, and at 20 I met my current partner. We had only known each other in passing, but around that time, we began talking more, and one thing led to another. I knew, of course, that he had a partner, and that I was the third party involved. Initially, it was more like casual intimacy between two people, and I did my best to offer him sincere advice about his relationship problems. It was something temporary, with no intention of lasting. But the spark ignited and created a fire of colossal proportions, of which I will give more details later. Around that time, my father also found a new partner, a woman 29 years his junior. She was 30. Her age didn't bother me because I was with someone 42 years older than me and still am. The problem started small. She would get jealous if my father gave me a necklace or took me to dinner. Even trivial things, like me doing the laundry and hanging it up when it rained, would make her yell at me. Following my grandmother's advice, I kept quiet. I worked, did my live streams, and went out with my partner to blow off steam. The breaking point came when the spark that had turned into a huge fire began to consume everything. My partner, remember, at that time, it was still a casual relationship, confessed to me that he was completely in love with me. He told me he understood me on a level his wife never had, and that he'd support me if I wanted to leave the relationship. In his words, "With how pretty and kind you are, you should look for someone young who values you. Not an old man like me. Any guy would be foolish to reject you." That phrase, perhaps because of the tone or the depth with which it was said, gave me an epiphany. I realized that what started as a casual connection had grown into something profound, two people completely in love who understood each other just by making eye contact. After I completely refused to walk away from what we had, we started searching for a practical solution. We decided he would divorce his wife, and we would move in together. In short, within about 4 months, we found the perfect house and the right moment to make everything official. But the tension at home kept escalating. She became jealous again, this time because I bought a second-hand Nissan Terrano with my savings. In every argument, my father took her side, while my grandmother was caught in the middle. Things came to a head one day when a petty argument over the couch cushions not being soft enough spiraled out of control. My father ended up hitting me. At that moment, I walked out. I called my partner, told him what had happened, and we agreed that it was time. After we moved, I returned to the house to collect my belongings. My grandmother, who had become like a second mother to me, was crying uncontrollably. She didn't want me to go, but my father's girlfriend told me that if I left, I shouldn't come back. My father just looked at the floor silently, not saying a word. A week later, I came back to pick up the few clothes I had left. There was nothing. My father and his girlfriend had burned everything. I was able to speak with my grandmother, who had some bruises on her face, but she wouldn't tell me what had caused them. I wish I had known. I must say that my grandmother is still alive. She's 99 years old and has the vitality of someone in their 70s. A few weeks passed, and rumors began spreading in the town's bars. People started whispering that I was involved in selling illegal substances, which was supposedly why I had left home and how I had money since I didn't have a conventional job. It was obvious to them. According to these rumors, I was also being accused of being someone who charged €20 an hour for inappropriate services. Most of the people who knew me didn't believe it, but they still approached me with concern to let me know what was being said. The source of these damaging stories: my father and his girlfriend. Around that same time, my mother reappeared, but not to reconcile or express care. Instead, she came only to insult me and my partner because of our age difference and to ask me for money. I told her that I would only consider helping her financially if she agreed to enter a rehabilitation clinic first. Fast forward a few years to early 2024. I hadn't seen my grandmother for quite some time. Every attempt to visit her was blocked. They wouldn't let me near the house. I tried twice, and both times, they literally threw rocks at my car. That same night, someone smashed the windows of my house and left a note that said, "Don't come near." Then, one evening, I received a call from one of my grandmother's oldest friends, someone around 95 or 96 years old. She was very distressed and told me that my grandmother was being physically mistreated by my father's girlfriend, and no one was stepping in to protect her. When I heard that, I was overwhelmed with fury. I wanted to confront her directly. My partner did his best to calm me down and advised me to be cautious, even joking that I might need to bend a few rules to fix things. So, that night, at 1 a.m, I showed up on foot at the house. My partner was parked about 50 meters away with the engine running, ready for a quick getaway if anything went wrong. I forced my way in. Those old locks open easily and went straight to my grandmother's room. I gently woke her up and asked if she wanted to come with me. She quickly said yes. My heart broke when I saw the bruises and wounds on her arms and back. Another wave of fury surged inside me. In that moment, I wanted to storm into my father's room and confront both him and the woman he shared the bed with. But I held back. In the middle of the night, my grandmother left the house with me. We didn't say anything to anyone, only left a note behind saying she was leaving. Days later, the fallout began. There were insults, threats, confrontations, and eventually a physical altercation that ended with my father suffering a broken arm after my partner stepped in to stop the chaos. My grandmother eventually made a full recovery. She is, fortunately, in good health and high spirits now. We were all finally happy, until we weren't. 3 days ago, I received a phone call from my father. He was in the hospital. He called to ask for forgiveness and said that his girlfriend had stabbed him in the neck. Thankfully, the wound hadn't damaged anything vital. During the call, he also asked if I could take care of the animals while he was recovering in the hospital. My first instinct was to hang up the phone. But I felt sorry for the animals. They had done nothing wrong, so I agreed to care for them by myself while he was away. Before ending the call, I made it clear that I didn't forgive him for everything he had done. He got offended. He called me a bad daughter and said I was making a mistake by not offering forgiveness. He claimed that my partner had influenced me against him, that I shouldn't believe anything my grandmother said because she was crazy, and that the whole world was against him. According to him, everything that went wrong was someone else's fault. He also tried to shift all the blame onto his girlfriend, or rather, I suppose she's his ex-girlfriend now. As of now, all I know is that she is being detained while awaiting her chance to testify. So now, just a few hours after visiting him in the hospital, I'm left with this question: should I forgive my father for being so unkind and cold for the last 7 years? Or should I finally cut him out of my life completely? I've read all of your comments. That's why I've taken the time to separate everything into proper paragraphs. Thank you all very much for commenting. I truly appreciate it. A part of me still wants to forgive him for the father he used to be, not for the man he has become. Story 5. I'm only vengeful when someone deserves it, and that's usually often, so I'll share one I did from 2011. Anyone who has seen my posts knows I used to work in the private security field. Not mall cops, but highly trained and skilled and armed security. We worked on residential buildings and complexes that were very high-end, like $200,000 cars in the parking garages high-end. Now places like this are Karen Central. Imagine apartments full of Karens and entitled teenagers. Now the company owner was awesome. A cop as his regular job, he understood what we faced. His advice was to be nice, but put the hammer down if you have to, and don't take their nonsense. Also that if we didn't get 2 complaints a month about us for worthless crap, then we were not engaging the residents enough. Lol. So, this is important to the revenge. Each supervisor had 10-15 properties under their control. Regular officers patrolled them, but we were in charge of helping with evictions, attending town halls on security issues, deciding how an officer patrols, or updating what areas are being a problem or needing to be checked. I had 12. Now in this one apartment complex, we had a couple always calling us. We had an emergency line open from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. When we got there, they cried about their upstairs neighbor. It was a list of things they just changed. Stomping, music, talking, cooking smells, their dog going number 1 on the balcony and it dripping onto theirs. Valid complaints if we found evidence, and we never did. When they saw we were starting to question if they were real, they changed tactics and went racist. The couple above them were a sweet and wonderful middle-aged Asian couple. Husband was an immigrant, but the wife was a born and raised American. These racist creations had only talked to the husband, so they assumed, as all racists do, that they were both immigrants. So this white couple started making comments like "those Asians" and "they are in America. Why can't they cook American food?" and "I'm afraid to be in the parking garage when one of them is driving in it." While it angered me, those comments alone weren't enough for an eviction. Only thing I could do was have my officers put exact phrasing in the report. I did ask the property manager about the comments, and she said if they didn't say them to the residents and the residents didn't complain, there wasn't much she could do. So I tried to think of some way to get them evicted. Not only were they lying to get a couple evicted, but were calling in false things and wasting the officers' time to respond. And they didn't call just every once in a while. They called sometimes twice in one night, usually 5-8 times a week. So a month later the opportunity was handed to me. The Asian couple called me during the day and informed me they were going out of the country, China, for 2 weeks, and no one would be in their apartment. They told me this just in case the other couple started complaining. I would know they were lying, and asked to check their door once a night to make sure it was locked and not broken into. I informed the Asian couple to not tell their neighbors that they were leaving, and besides myself only, to tell the property manager too. We had a patrol meeting that night. Officers didn't work in one specific region, so I told them all my plans. I wanted them to respond each time they called and write down exactly what they said happened, and also any racial terms no matter how minor. Mark the report as urgent and send it out. We had an online system for all businesses. Email, schedules, report submitting, you get the idea. So away we go. During those 14 days, they complained 18 times. Everything was documented, and I took it to the manager. She looked it over and said, let's evict them. Side note, the client gets charged more for emergency response than they do for regular patrols, meaning their lives were costing money. So, there was no HOA because they were rentals. In this situation myself, the property manager and the tenants sit down at a table. The charges for eviction are read. If the eviction of security is related, then I say what violations have been broken, etc., not opinions, just facts based on the reports which the tenants get a copy of. Then the tenants have a right to speak and ask questions. The property manager then decides what happens next. Do they stay or do they go? So they were sent a formal letter stating they were facing eviction and had 10 days to set up a meeting. If not, the eviction will be processed. They set one up. I get there and the jerk couple and the manager are already present. The wife immediately digs into me because I was armed. Uniforms for those situations are a dress shirt, slacks, tie and one weapon and one magazine. Things like elections can be dangerous. I just politely informed her that it was my uniform and not her call to make. She tried to say she felt uncomfortable and wanted to reschedule, but the manager said this happens now or I will evict you. So they agreed to continue. Now, for legal reasons, these sessions were recorded by video. That way the tenant can't lie in eviction court or sue. In front of me were all 18 reports and went over each one. Time, date, who called the apartment number. I also read out each line telling them to tell me what they feel is false and what is true. The only thing they said is that the racial terms weren't true. At the end of each report, I basically said, the report is accurate in the fact that tenants in apartment Zais were playing their music too loud, but you are claiming the comments about their race are false? I got a yes answer every time. About the 7th one, I think the wife caught one. She started complaining that I was dragging it out. I just smiled politely and reminded her that this was my time, and she had ample opportunity to object and ask me questions, but only after I was done, and then went through the rest and let them build a defense. Then, after I was done getting the admit to lies, I informed them that the tenants in said apartment were actually out of the country at the time of those 18 reports, and that the tenants provided proof that they were gone, and my officers checked the apartment one time a night and confirmed that it was empty. Then I smiled pleasantly and ended my part, but the look on their face was a mix of anger and fear. They didn't have a defense. Basically saying myself and the manager were choosing immigrants over Americans. Oh, did I mention the manager is an immigrant? That went over like a hand grenade in a collection plate. Once they said that, she stopped it and told them she was an immigrant. That made matters worse because they said she was just taking up for her own kind. During this, I'm calm and collected. Inside my mind, I'm thinking, oh heck. After a few more racial remarks, the manager just stopped them and said guilty, and she would process the eviction paperwork with the courts in the morning. Long story short, they were given 14 days. From what I heard, the judge actually gave them 30 until they called him a racial name. I was able to call the nice Asian couple and let them know that it was over, and they didn't have to worry because we would no longer respond to calls about their apartment for the next 14 days until eviction came through and the bad tenants left. But they were welcome to call anytime if they needed help or have an issue. Security officers normally want to help so badly, but are unfortunately limited by either laws, property management rules, or both, so it is nice to do some good.